the trainer's blueprint, another one of Meirc's free webinar 2019. For those of you who are joining us perhaps for the first time on this webinar, allow me first of all to highlight a few things perhaps that you can use. You can see there's a chat window available for those that would like to ask questions throughout the webinar. Please feel free to ask me any question that you like at any time during the webinar. I'll be more than happy to answer them. I might answer them either while the webinar is going, or I might leave them till the end. Or if time does not permit, I'll make sure to answer each and every question by the end of the webinar, or even by email after. Now, when we look at a trainer's blueprint, I'd like us to think whether, first of all, a blueprint is required or not. Well, if you ask engineers or architects on how important is the blueprint to their construction project, I am sure their answer is going to be extremely important. Now, if you listen to engineers or architects in a work site, part of what you hear is related to floor plans, an elevation view, a side view of an exterior, a perspective projection, etc. Now, these could be readings from blueprints or of a guide for making something. It's a design, it's a pattern that can be followed. Now, a blueprint is specifically for engineers and architects a design of the final shape of their construction. Now, having said that, and before I define what a training blueprint is, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Jimmy Haddad. I come with 14 years of experience in human resources management, leadership, and training. Currently with Meirc, I design and deliver solutions in a number of fields, including performance management, training and development, leadership, interpersonal, and self-development. And I've delivered plenty of solutions to clients in both the government and the private sectors. I'm a father of 3 and a passionate sports fan and a player. Now, the purpose of our webinar today is to focus on 3 main elements. One is to look at the trainer's blueprint and its uses. So we're trying to answer the question of what is a trainer's blueprint and what could the blueprint be used for. The second part that we're going to focus on would be the components of a blueprint, or what makes a blueprint. What are the major sections of a blueprint? And finally, we're going to look at completing a sample blueprint where I'll be filling a blueprint that I often use in designing my training. So to begin, and in short, a trainer's blueprint is a document whose purpose is to lay out the entire design of any training session. So think of it as a map that lists the entire layout, the entire design of the training session. Now, why would we use that? It can be used by the trainer in the phase of designing a training course, and it will also be used by the trainer in the phase of delivering that same course. It can also be used by the training department for approving learning interventions, for assessing course delivery, and perhaps for evaluating training. So in essence, a blueprint is an output of the design phase of the ADDIE model. Now, the model that appears in front of you is perhaps the most used model in the field of training and development. Any trainer begins by analyzing the training needs, and that's the A of the ADDIE model. Once a full analysis is done, then the trainer would proceed to the design phase. In the design phase, one of the major outputs of that phase is the trainer blueprint. Once the design of the blueprint has been complete, then a trainer begins developing his material. And once the entire material has been developed, then the trainer is ready to implement or deliver the training solution. And finally, after the delivery of training, A trainer evaluates his training delivery, and obviously there are plenty of levels of evaluation that are not part of our webinar today. However, the focus of our webinar today is strictly on the trainer blueprint that begins and ends in the design phase of the ADDIE model, the first D of the ADDIE model. So when I say a blueprint, to look at its various components, you can see in front of you a sample of a blueprint of a training session. Now, I'm going to highlight each and every section of this blueprint, and I will begin by the top part, which is really general information about the course or the session that you are trying to design. Notice first there is a course title, and by course title we always recommend to have an attractive course title. You can name a course presentation skills, but you can name that same course making powerful presentations. Perhaps latter is slightly more attractive. So as a trainer, when you are considering a course title, make sure that you develop an attractive course title. In that same section on top as well, you will find information related to the module number and the module title. Now, a simple example would be simply module number 1. And a module title could be, for instance, definition of time management if we're developing a course related to time management. Now, notice the section below that, which really lists the objectives. Now, in this particular section, you would list the objectives. Obviously, there are rules on how to develop proper objectives, but objectives normally would sound like, at the end of this module, participants will be able to define time management and list its components, or apply the time management matrix in prioritizing personal to-do lists. These are just a few examples of what could be learning objectives for a course on time management. Another part of the blueprint would be that first column, which is titled topic or lesson structure. Now, the focus of this particular section is to list the topics that will be covered during the training session. Now, the recommendation is obviously to list them in a logical and a sequential manner. Another example here would be, for instance, definition of time management would be a topic, major time wasters would be another topic, and time management assessment would be a third topic. Another column to consider would be the learning method. And for me, this is an extremely important column in a training blueprint. Now, obviously, there are plenty of learning methods, and some examples could be things like a lecturette or a mini lecture, role play, a group activity, brainstorming, workshops, video, perhaps a demonstration with practice, maybe a game, maybe a handout, maybe a debate, maybe a panel discussion. So really the learning methods are plenty. Now, what's important to note here is that the learning method chosen should align with two things. First, it should align with the topic, and it should align with the objectives that you have developed for your training session. Now, in this particular case, I would like to share with you a rule that I use in choosing a learning method. My choice of a learning method is always dependent on whether I want to teach new knowledge or I want to improve an existing skill or even teach a new skill, or I want to impact attitude. So let me clarify here. If the content that I am designing focuses on just teaching or allowing participants to know the 5 steps of the ADDIE model, probably I would choose lecturette, and I would talk about the phases of the ADDIE model in perhaps 15 minutes. So that would be the lecture learning method for teaching participants on the phases of the ADDIE model. By the end of the lecture, they will be able to list the phases. But if I were to teach participants how to apply the ADDIE model in their organizations, then obviously I cannot use a lecture to do that. The lecture will only help me provide the knowledge, but for them to apply the ADDIE model in their work environment, then they need to learn the skill. And for them to learn the skill, maybe I need to consider a case study, maybe I need to consider a role play, maybe I need to let them demonstrate what they learned and how they will apply it. So notice that my learning method changes depending on what I'm trying to achieve in the objective of the lesson and the topic itself. Now, another part of the blueprint is the materials or media column. Now, again, every trainer needs a training toolkit. Now, examples of material that can be included in the trainer's toolkit could be things like colored post-it notes, scissors, rope, flip chart paper, markers, a video title, tubes, nuts, bolts, and obviously the list goes on and on and on. These are the objects, the materials that the trainer would need while delivering the session. Now, obviously, I recommend that every trainer carries with him or her their personal toolkit where these objects will be there to be used in every training session. Now, another column for a blueprint would be that of the anecdotes, stories, and examples. Now, to flavor up your delivery, you need a list of real life stories, examples that you can use while delivering. Now, these are the spices, the Tabascos, that will keep your participants engaged. If it wasn't from these, participants will probably switch their thinking to something else. In my personal blueprints, you would find examples on perhaps an analogy of a hamburger, the ingredients of a chicken biryani, a vacation I had recently in Istanbul, a story of my father, maybe a report that I have recently watched on CNN related to financial markets. I would like to draft or write the anecdotes in this column to make sure that when I am delivering my training session, I am sharing with participants these stories that are very much related to the content and the objectives I am trying to achieve. Without this column, trust me, plenty of these stories would be forgotten, and the trainer would even forget to share them with participants. Now, a final column on a blueprint could be a column for time, and it's planned or expected time based on the learning methods used. So there I would indicate how long will it take me, or how long do I plan to spend on a particular topic, particular learning method. You may consider adding a second column for actual time to be completed during the delivery of training. Now, by actual time, it'll be able to allow you to compare between planned and actual. Example here, I would write things like 20 minutes, 45 minutes, 15 minutes. It will allow me to look at my entire design, and it will allow me to stay on point when I am delivering my training session. Now, that's the sample I showed you in the beginning, where I actually dissected each of the columns and the sections. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to complete or demonstrate completing a sample of a blueprint to see or to give you a flavor on what I normally do in the design phase. So I'm going to share with you my screen, and I'm going to open a blank copy of a blueprint, and perhaps we're going to fill that. Meanwhile, if there's any particular topic that you'd like us to start designing a blueprint for, please feel free to perhaps add it in the chat box. Now, so we begin with the course title, and we might want to perhaps begin with a course, for instance, on time management. So let me write here, time management. Now, if you look at this particular course title, it looks very generic and probably not too attractive. So maybe we want to consider a title that's slightly more attractive. And if you were considering here developing a blueprint for a short session on time management, perhaps maybe 2 hours, then maybe I may want to call the course a different title. And in that particular case, I will call the course Tips and Techniques in Time Management. Now, obviously, we can be more creative than this, but assuming our title of the course will be Tips and Techniques in Time Management, it's made, since it's a short course, it will be made up of only one module, and perhaps the module title here would be Techniques of Time Management. Now, what are some objectives that I'd like to cover in the course? Well, first, I want to define time management and its components. Maybe I also want to identify and manage time wasters. And finally, I want participants to be able to set goals and determine their priorities. So now we are in the design phase. We are trying to design a blueprint from scratch for a mini session that's titled Tips and Techniques in Time Management that has 3 main objectives. So if I were to add here at the end of this training, participants will be able to 1, define time management and its components, 2, identify and manage time wasters, and 3, set goals and determine their priorities. So my first topic really is about defining time management. Now notice that first topic is directly related to my first learning objective, which is defining time management. Now I'm still left with the components of time management. So probably that would be my second topic, components of time management. So now I'm thinking, what is the learning method that I'm going to use to define time management? So as a facilitator, I might say, you know what? I may want to use a lecturette, but can I use something different other than a lecturette? Maybe I want to use brainstorming first. And I want to do that in some sort of a group activity. So in this particular case, what I'm thinking is the following. I'm thinking of perhaps grouping participants together and then asking them in their respective groups to define time management. And then let each group present what time management is to them. So for me to do that and to create some sort of an excitement, I would need flip chart paper and markers for each team. So I'm assuming I'm delivering a course for 20 participants that on 4 round tables, 5 each. I would need 4 flip chart paper or stands and a number of different colored markers for each team. So the group activity would be for the participants to take at least 10 minutes to define what time management is. Now, obviously, when they define and then they have to present, that would take an additional time. And then for me as a facilitator, I need to add my final touches and really share with them what is time management. So that's not going to take 10 minutes. So let me delete that and let me perhaps write 20 minutes as my current planned time for defining time management. Now, notice here, we are left with anecdotes, stories, and examples. I need to give this particular session a flavor. Maybe before I distribute participants into teams, I may want to share a particular story about a personal experience I had with a bus stop in Canada. Now, I've lived in Canada for a long time, and I remember when I first arrived, I had to take the bus. So I pick up the bus schedule, and on it I noticed that the bus would pass at 8:01, 8:05, 8:09. I noticed they were very punctual. In my 10 years, rarely would the bus ever be late. So that story could be the story that I want to say before people define time management. So if I write bus stop in Canada, me being the facilitator, I would remember what the story is to be able to share during the class. So if we move to the next topic, which is components of time management, again, I'm thinking, what's the learning method I want to use for components of time management? Now, I'm not a big fan of lectures or lecturettes. So again, I'm thinking of perhaps different ways that I may use, and let me write here activity cards. So here I perhaps need to prepare a number of activity cards, a deck or a set, where each card would list a component of time management. I know there are 12 components, so maybe I'll have a set of 12 cards. But notice, I need 4 sets of these because I have 4 teams. So I'm writing activity card here, and here I would actually need to write the type of activity. So I'm going to say laminated A5 cards, and then this particular activity would probably take 30 minutes. Now, again, I haven't explained the activity in full, but I believe you get a sense of what I'm trying to achieve here. Now, notice so far, we've been in the session for 5 minutes, or we are designing a session that has consumed 50 minutes of our time. Now, we still need to identify and manage time wasters. So let me write here time wasters. And again, how will I, well, guess what? I have a video here that highlights plenty of time wasters. So I'm going to play that video, and obviously I need the video title. So I'm going to say video on time wasters. Do I need anything else? Well, after the video, I want to share a handout that has a few questions related to the video. So I'm going to write handout time wasters. I know which one that is. And then, is there an anecdote, a story, an example? Well, once somebody told me an example of a person who perhaps wasted time in traffic. So I'm going to highlight here traffic example. So the video, I know the video is 3 minutes long. I know the handout will probably take 10 minutes, so that's 13 minutes. And my example, so here again, we're looking at least 20 minutes. Now notice it's an hour and 10 minutes into the session. So we continue doing that, and we need to look at setting goals, and then we do the same for the learning method, the material, the anecdotes, the stories, and the examples. Now, this is an example of a training blueprint. So I'm going to go back to the slides, and obviously a blueprint, or what we tried to do, what I tried to show you, is only a draft. So this is a very preliminary draft of a number of drafts that you will have to formulate before you really have a final design. Now, in my own experience, if I'm designing a session or a new course completely from scratch, I would probably consume anywhere between 3 to 5 blueprints until I'm satisfied with the final blueprint. Now, some advantages for me is that when I look at the learning methods column, I want to make sure that I'm not using the same learning method. I want to make sure there is variety, and I also want to make sure that I'm using plenty of anecdotes, stories, and examples during my session. So I would really spend a lot of time in the following two columns, in the learning method and the anecdote, stories, and examples. And I keep refining these. Now, fast forward, and let me take you to the design phase. Once the design phase is complete, and once I develop my material and everything is ready, now comes time to actually delivering and implementing the training. So here, I actually take with me the design, the blueprint, and I keep it handy because I will be following the same structure. I will be using the same methods. I will be referring to the stories by using the media, and I'll make sure to abide by the time as developed in the final approved blueprint. So this wraps my details on a trainer's blueprint. But before I actually wrap up the session, allow me to highlight the fact that we at Meirc deliver a number of training sessions for trainers. One is titled Train the Trainer from Design to Delivery, and the other is titled Certified Master Trainer. Both of these sessions are scheduled to be delivered in Dubai, one in October, the week of October 6th, in English, and the other scheduled to be delivered in Arabic the week of December 1. I want to personally thank you all for joining the webinar today, and in case you have any question, please feel free to type it in the chat box. If not, then thank you for your attention, and hopefully we will talk soon. Before I end this event, and for those who are interested in downloading a copy of the slides that I have used today, you will find in front of you the option of clicking on a detailed look at the trainer's blueprint. There's a blue icon on the right side of that shared files window. Feel free to click on it to be able to download a copy of the slides. Once again, I'd like to thank you for participating in today's webinar. Talk soon.
Meirc.com